The final trial took place at dawn in the Great Colosseum at the center of the Velthari capital city. Thousands of aliens filled the seats to witness what they expected to be Jake's death. He stood alone in the center of the arena while Honor, Keeper Thal, addressed the crowd from his elevated platform. "Behold the alien who dared interfere with our sacred ways," Thal's voice echoed across the Colosseum. 4 trials he has survived through luck and trickery. But now comes the test that separates the worthy from the weak. Single combat to the death with no rules and no mercy. Jake looked around at the hostile faces surrounding him. Every Velthari in the crowd wanted to see him fail. They could not accept that a soft human from a weak species had made it this far. To them, he was an insult to their entire way of life. But Jake was no longer the same man who had boarded the alien transport ship 5 days ago. The trials had changed him. His body was covered in scars, and his muscles had been pushed beyond their limits. More importantly, his mind had been tested in ways he never imagined possible. He had learned that pain was temporary, but principles were permanent. He had discovered that humans could endure anything if they had something worth fighting for. And he had proven that compassion and determination were not weaknesses, but the greatest strengths any species could possess. Honor Keeper Thal descended from his platform carrying an ancient ceremonial weapon. It was a long curved blade with strange markings along its edge. The old alien moved with deadly grace despite his age, and Jake could see this would be his most dangerous opponent yet. "I have overseen the choosing for 50 years human," Thal said as he approached. "I have killed more challengers than you can imagine. Your species knows nothing of true combat." Jake did not reply. He had no weapons except his bare hands and his human ingenuity. Thal was faster, stronger, and armed with a blade that could cut through metal. In a straight fight, Jake had no chance of winning, but Jake had learned something important during his time with the Velthari. They followed their ancient laws exactly without deviation or creativity. Their rigid thinking was both their strength and their weakness. They could not adapt when someone did something unexpected. "Begin," Thal commanded, and immediately lunged forward with his blade. Jake dodged to the side and began running around the edge of the arena. The crowd jeered at his apparent cowardice, but Jake was not fleeing. He was thinking. There had to be some way to turn this situation to his advantage. Thal pursued him with deadly efficiency, striking at Jake whenever he got close enough. The blade whistled through the air, missing Jake by inches each time. But the old alien was patient and experienced. He knew eventually his opponent would tire and make a mistake. As they circled the arena, Jake studied Thal's fighting style. Like all Velthari, he followed specific patterns and techniques. His attacks were powerful but predictable once you understood the system. And Jake was very good at understanding systems. More importantly, Jake began to understand something about the trial itself. This was not really about combat. It was about proving worth according to Velthari values. But what if someone challenged those values directly? Jake stopped running and faced Thal in the center of the arena. The Honor Keeper smiled coldly, thinking his opponent had finally given up. "Ready to die, human?" "I have a question first," Jake said loudly enough for the entire crowd to hear. "Is this really about honor?" Thal paused with his weapon raised. "What do you mean? Your whole society is built around killing children who don't meet your standards. You murder the weak, the different, the ones who think for themselves. How is that honorable?" The crowd began to murmur angrily, but Jake continued. Before anyone could stop him, "I've seen your trials. They test cruelty, not courage. They reward violence, not wisdom. A truly strong society protects its young and values all its members. What you do is not strength, it's fear. Thal's face darkened with rage. You dare question our sacred traditions? I'm not questioning them. I'm stating facts. Look at what you've become. A civilization that cannot grow or change because you kill anyone who thinks differently. You're not strong, you're dying. Jake spread his arms wide, addressing the entire crowd now. My people don't murder children for being weak. We help them become strong. We don't execute those who fail. We teach them to succeed. That's why humans have spread across the galaxy while you're still trapped by your own fear. The Colosseum erupted in angry shouts, but Jake pressed on. Zara didn't fail your trials because she was weak. She failed because she was smart enough to see how pointless they are. She represents the future of your species if you let her live. Honor Keeper Thal raised his weapon high. Enough blasphemy. You will die for these words. But Jake had accomplished something unprecedented in Velthari history. He had made them think. In the crowd, young Velthari, who would soon face their own choosing, began to question what they had been taught. Adults who had lost children to the trials wondered if there might be another way. The speech was being broadcast throughout Velthari space, and Jake could see the effect it was having. For the first time in centuries, someone had challenged their most basic assumptions about strength and honor. Thal attacked with desperate fury, trying to silence the human who was destroying everything he believed in. But his attacks were wild, now driven by emotion rather than technique. Jake dodged and weaved, using the Honor Keeper's anger against him. You say your trials create strong warriors, Jake called out as he avoided another blade strike. But I'm beating your greatest champion with nothing but words and movement. Maybe your definition of strength needs work. The crowd was divided. Now. Some cheered for Thal to kill the blasphemous human. Others began to shout questions about the trials and the senseless deaths of so many young people. The rigid order of Velthari society was starting to crack. Thal stumbled as his wild swings threw him off balance. Jake saw his chance and moved in close. He grabbed the Honor Keeper's weapon arm and used a wrestling technique to throw the older alien to the ground. The ceremonial blade skittered away across the arena floor. Jake could have picked up the weapon and killed his opponent. The crowd expected it. The rules demanded it. But instead, Jake did something that shocked every Velthari watching. He helped Thal to his feet. This is what real strength looks like, Jake said to the stunned crowd. Helping those who cannot help themselves. Protecting the weak instead of destroying them. Building up instead of tearing down. Honor Keeper Thal stared at Jake in confusion. You could have killed me. Why did you not take your victory? Because proving I can kill you doesn't make me strong. Proving I don't have to makes me stronger. The Colosseum fell completely silent. In the history of the choosing, no one had ever shown mercy to a defeated opponent. The very concept was foreign to Velthari thinking. But they could not deny what they had witnessed. War leader Kethvar descended to the arena floor with his guards behind him. Jake tensed, expecting another fight, but the alien commander looked more confused than angry. You have passed the trials, human, Kethvar said reluctantly. By ancient law, you have earned honor status among our people, and Zara is free to go as agreed. But I do not understand your actions. You could have died with glory in battle. Instead, you chose to humiliate our greatest honor keeper. Jake looked up at the thousands of Velthari faces surrounding him. Many looked angry, but others seemed thoughtful. Seeds of doubt had been planted that would grow over time. I didn't humiliate him. I showed him there was another way to be strong. In the days that followed, Jake's words spread throughout Velthari society. Young people began to question the necessity of the choosing. Parents who had lost children demanded explanations from their leaders. The rigid structure that had held their civilization together for millennia began to show cracks. Jake was reunited with his crew on the Starforge to find Zara fully recovered and eager to thank him. The young alien girl had tears in her large eyes as she hugged him. "You saved me," she whispered. "But you did more than that. You saved my people from themselves." Jake smiled as he looked around at his crewmates. They were his family, and he was home. "That's what humans do, Zara. We don't just solve problems. We change the game entirely." Captain Hayes clapped him on the shoulder. "So what happens now?" "Now we go home. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning." Jake was right. Over the following years, the Velthari slowly began to reform their society. The choosing was not abolished immediately, but alternatives were created. Young people who failed the trials could now choose exile instead of death. Some even traveled to human worlds to learn different ways of living. Zara became an ambassador between her people and humanity. She helped other Velthari youth who wanted to escape their brutal culture and showed them that weakness could become strength when properly nurtured. The human who had faced the trials alone had done more than save one alien girl. He had planted the seeds of change in an entire civilization. And though it would take generations to fully bloom, those seeds would eventually transform the Velthari into something their ancestors never imagined they could become. A species that valued life instead of death, compassion instead of cruelty, hope instead of fear. That was the human way, and it was spreading among the stars. The trial world surface was even worse than Jake had imagined from orbit. Red sand stretched endlessly in all directions under a burning orange sun. The air was thin and hot and filled with dust that made breathing difficult. Jake stood on a platform surrounded by Velthari warriors and officials who had come to watch him die. Honor Keeper Thal raised his staff and spoke to the gathered crowd. "Today, we witness an unprecedented event. An alien has dared to interfere with our sacred choosing. Now he must prove his worth or perish as all weaklings do." Another Velthari stepped forward. This one was massive even by their standards, with arms like tree trunks and scars covering his dark blue skin. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stones. "I am Combat Master Vrex. I oversee the physical trials. Human, you will face 5 tests over 5 days, each harder than the last. Most of our own people die during these challenges." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and tried to appear confident. "Tell me about the first test." Vrex pointed toward the horizon where Jake could see a distant mountain peak shimmering in the heat. "You must reach the sacred shrine at the top of Mount Kalor. You will carry the burden stones of judgment. You have until the sun sets, or you fail." 2 Velthari warriors brought forward a heavy pack filled with large rocks. When they placed it on Jake's shoulders, he nearly collapsed. The weight was enormous, at least 200 pounds. On this world with its higher gravity, it felt even heavier. "No food, no water, no rest," Vrex continued. "The weak die in the first hour." Jake adjusted the pack and looked toward the mountain. It had to be at least 30 miles away across burning desert sand. The temperature was already over 100 degrees and climbing. His mouth was dry and his legs were shaking under the enormous weight. "Begin," Thal commanded. Jake started walking. The first steps were agony. The pack dug into his shoulders, and the straps cut into his skin. The sand was soft, and his feet sank with every step, making progress even harder. Around him, the Velthari watched and waited for him to collapse. After the first mile, Jake was already struggling. Sweat poured down his face, and his breathing was labored. The pack felt like it was getting heavier with every step. He could hear some of the Velthari talking among themselves about how long he would last. But Jake had learned something important about himself over the years. When things got really bad, he could find strength he did not know he had. His father had taught him that before the mining accident took his life, pain was temporary, but quitting lasted forever. Jake focused on putting one foot in front of the other. He tried not to think about the distance remaining or the burning sun overhead. Instead, he thought about Zara and her frightened eyes. He thought about all the young Velthari who had died in these pointless trials. He thought about his crewmates on the Star Forge, depending on him to succeed. Hour after hour, Jake trudged through the desert. The sun climbed higher, and the temperature rose past 120 degrees. His lips cracked and his vision started to blur from dehydration. Several times he stumbled and almost fell, but somehow kept going. The Velthari following him on their flying platforms seemed surprised he had lasted this long. Jake could hear them talking about previous trials where participants had died of heat stroke within the first few hours. But humans were adapted for long-distance travel. Their ancestors had crossed continents on foot when necessary. By midday, Jake had covered 15 miles. The mountain was getting closer, but still looked impossibly far away. His legs felt like rubber, and his shoulders were raw from the pack straps. Every breath was like swallowing fire, but he kept moving. Combat Master Vrex flew down on his platform to observe Jake more closely. "You surprise me, human. Most collapsed by now." Jake did not waste energy on words. He just kept walking, one step at a time toward the distant peak. The sun was past its highest point now, which meant he had maybe 6 hours until sunset. He would need every minute. The afternoon brought new challenges. The terrain started to slope upward and became rocky instead of sandy. Jake had to climb over boulders and navigate narrow passages while carrying the crushing weight on his back. His hands were cut and bleeding from grabbing sharp rocks for support, but the cooler temperature as he gained altitude gave him a second wind. Jake found he could move a little faster now that he was not dealing with the full desert heat. The mountain peak was still far above, but it no longer looked impossible. As evening approached, Jake reached the final slope leading to the shrine. His legs were shaking uncontrollably, and he could barely see through the sweat and dust in his eyes. The pack felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds now. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. The Velthari watching him had fallen silent. Jake realized they had expected him to die hours ago. Now they were seeing something they had never witnessed before. A soft alien from a weak species, refusing to give up no matter what they threw at him. The last 100 yards up the mountain were the hardest of Jake's life. He fell twice and had to crawl part of the way. Blood ran down his legs from where the rocks had cut him. But when he finally reached the shrine at the mountain peak, the sun was still visible above the horizon. Jake collapsed next to the ancient stone structure and let the pack fall from his destroyed shoulders. He had done it. He had completed the first trial. Around him, the Velthari stared in shocked silence. Combat Master Vrex landed his platform nearby and walked over to examine Jake. Impressive human. But this was the easiest trial. Tomorrow brings true pain. Jake was too exhausted to respond, but he managed to nod. They gave him water and a small amount of food before transporting him back to his cell. As he lay on the hard sleeping mat, Jake assessed the damage to his body. His shoulders were badly injured and his feet were a mass of blisters. But he was alive, and he had proven humans were not as weak as the Velthari believed. The second trial came at dawn. Jake was led to a circular arena where 3 Velthari warriors waited for him. They were younger and smaller than Vrex, but still much larger than any human. Their bodies were covered in ritual scars and they held wicked-looking bladed weapons. "Hand-to-hand combat," Vrex announced. "No weapons for the human. He must defeat all 3 opponents or die trying." Jake looked at his opponents and knew this. Trial would be different from the first. Yesterday had been about endurance and willpower. Today would be about violence and death. The Velthari warriors smiled as they advanced on him, showing sharp teeth. The first warrior attacked with a curved blade aimed at Jake's chest. Jake dodged to the side and grabbed the alien's wrist. Using his opponent's momentum against him, Jake threw the warrior to the ground. But before he could follow up, the second warrior was on him, swinging a heavy club. Jake ducked under the swing and drove his elbow into the warrior's ribs. He heard something crack, but the alien barely seemed to notice. These opponents were tougher than any human Jake had ever fought. Their skin was thick and their bones were dense. Normal fighting techniques might not work. The third warrior came at Jake from behind with a spear. Jake spun and caught the weapon's shaft, stopping the point inches from his back. He twisted hard and broke the spear in half, then used the broken end to strike his attacker in the face. For 20 minutes, Jake fought for his life against opponents who were stronger, faster, and better armed than he was. He took dozens of cuts and bruises, but refused to stay down. When one warrior knocked him to the ground, Jake rolled away and came up fighting. When another grabbed him from behind, Jake broke free with a desperate burst of strength. The alien fleet appeared on the Starforge's sensors exactly 18 hours after Zara had finished telling them about the trials. Jake watched from the bridge as 20 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace and surrounded the mining vessel. Each alien ship was twice the size of the Starforge and bristled with weapons. Captain Hayes stood calmly at her command station, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. They all knew this moment was coming, but seeing the enemy fleet made it real in a way that planning could not. "They're hailing us, Captain," the communication officer reported. "Put them through." The main screen flickered and then showed the interior of an alien bridge. A tall Velthari in elaborate armor stood at the center. His skin was darker blue than Zara's and covered with scars. His eyes were cold and calculating as they studied the human crew. "I am War Leader Kethvar of the Velthari hunting fleet. You will surrender the runaway Zara immediately or face the consequences." Hayes stepped forward. "I am Captain Lisa Hayes of the mining vessel Starforge. The person you're looking for is under our protection." Kethvar's expression did not change, but Jake saw his hands tighten on his weapon belt. "You do not understand the situation, human. The runaway has brought dishonor to our people. She must face justice." "Your justice means murdering a child," Hayes replied firmly. "We don't recognize your authority over someone who came to us for help." For a moment, Jake thought Kethvar might simply order an attack. The alien commander's eyes flashed with anger, and his warriors behind him reached for their weapons. But then another figure stepped into view. This Velthari was older and wore robes instead of armor. His skin was pale, almost white, and covered, with strange markings. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Kethvar's, but somehow more frightening. I am Honor Keeper Thal. I oversee the sacred rituals of our people. Perhaps there is another way to resolve this situation. Hayes looked suspicious. What kind of other way? Our laws are ancient and cover many situations. There is provision for outsiders who interfere with the choosing. Jake felt his heart start beating faster. This was the moment they had been preparing for. He stepped forward before Hayes could respond. Tell us about this provision, Jake said. Thal's strange eyes fixed on him. Any outsider who prevents a runaway from facing justice may take their place in the trials. If the outsider survives all tests, the runaway is freed. If the outsider fails, both die. And if no one accepts this challenge, then the runaway returns with us immediately for public execution. Jake heard Zara make a small sound of fear from behind him. She was standing near the back of the bridge, still weak from her injuries, but insisting on being present for this confrontation. Kethvar spoke up angrily. Honor Keeper, this is foolish. These humans know nothing of our ways. They cannot survive the trials. The law is clear, War Leader. The choice must be offered. Hayes moved to stand beside Jake. What exactly do these trials involve? Thal smiled, but there was no warmth in it. 5 tests spread over 5 days, each designed to break the spirit and body of the weak. The outsider would face them alone on our sacred world with none of his people's technology to help him. And if he survives, then he earns honor status among our people and may choose his own fate. But I must warn you, even our own youth trained from birth have little chance of success. A soft alien from a weak species has no hope at all. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. These aliens thought humans were weak because they did not murder their own children. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I accept the challenge, Jake said clearly. The bridge fell silent. Hayes grabbed his arm. Jake, no. We can find another way. There is no other way, Captain. You know that. Kethvar laughed harshly. The human thinks he is brave. He will learn the meaning of pain soon enough. But Thal looked more interested than amused. You understand what you are agreeing to, human? You will face trials that have killed thousands of our strongest warriors. I understand perfectly. Jake, please. Zara stepped forward with tears in her large eyes. You cannot do this for me. I'm not worth your life. Jake turned to face her. Yes, you are. Every innocent life is worth protecting. Thal nodded slowly. Very well. The challenge is accepted. You will come aboard our ship immediately. Wait, Hayes interrupted. We need guarantees. How do we know you'll honor the agreement if he wins? Our honor binds us to the ancient laws, Captain Hayes. If your warrior survives the trials, the runaway will go free, and he will be granted safe passage home. And if he dies, then justice is served and the runaway dies as well. Jake looked around the bridge at his crewmates. These people had become his family over the years. He hated leaving them, but there was no choice. Zara needed a champion, and he was the only one who could fill that role. I need a few minutes to prepare, Jake said. Thal inclined his head. You have 1 hour. Then we depart for the trial world. The communication channel closed and the bridge erupted in voices. Cole argued that they should try to run. Rodriguez wanted to contact the human colonies for help. Others suggested different plans, but Jake knew none of them would work. Hayes called for quiet and then pulled Jake aside. Are you absolutely sure about this? Yes, Captain. It's the only way. You could die, Jake. These aren't human tests. They're designed to kill people. Jake smiled sadly. I know. But I've been thinking about what Zara told us. Her people follow their laws exactly. They can't change or adapt. That might be their weakness. What do you mean? Humans are good at adapting, at finding new solutions to old problems. Maybe that will be enough. Hayes sighed and squeezed his shoulder. Then God help you, Jake Morrison. The next hour passed quickly. Jake gathered a few personal items and said goodbye to his friends. Dr. Rodriguez gave him medical supplies and advice about treating injuries. Cole showed him basic combat techniques. Everyone wanted to help, but they all knew he would face the trials alone. When it was time to leave, Zara walked with him to the airlock. She had been crying and could barely speak. Why you do this for me? She whispered. Because it's right, Jake replied. Because you deserve a chance to live your life. If you die, I will never forgive myself. Jake knelt down, so they were at the same height. If I die, it won't be your fault. It will be because I chose to fight for something I believe in. The alien transport ship docked with the Starforge, and Jake boarded alone. The Velthari warriors who met him were silent and grim. They escorted him to a small cell where he would wait during the journey to the trial world. As the transport pulled away from the Starforge, Jake looked out the small window and saw his home ship growing smaller in the distance. He wondered if he would ever see it again. But then he thought about Zara and her frightened eyes, and he knew he had made the right choice. The trial world was 3 days away. Jake used the time to prepare himself mentally for what was coming. He exercised in his cell and meditated and tried to understand his enemies better. The Velthari guards brought him food and water but never spoke to him. On the final day of the journey, Honor Keeper Thal visited Jake's cell. The old alien studied him carefully before speaking. I am curious, human. Why do your people value individual lives so highly? It makes your species weak. Jake looked up at him calmly. Does it? We've survived wars and disasters and expanded across the galaxy without murdering our own children. Maybe our way makes us stronger, not weaker. We shall see. Tomorrow you begin the trials. I hope you die well. I plan on living well, Jake replied. Thal left without another word. Jake spent his final night thinking about home and family and the young alien girl whose life depended on his success. He was scared, but also determined. The Velthari thought they were superior because they were cruel and ruthless. Tomorrow, Jake would show them the strength of human compassion and stubborn refusal to give up. He would show them that protecting the innocent was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. The trial world appeared outside his window as a harsh red planet covered in deserts and mountains. Somewhere down there, 5 deadly tests waited for him. But Jake was ready. He would not fail Zara. He would not fail his species, and he would not fail himself. Dr. Sam Rodriguez had seen many injuries during his years as a ship's medic, but nothing quite like this. Zara lay on the medical bay table while he worked to treat her wounds. Her blood was purple instead of red, and her bone structure was different from humans, but the basics were similar enough that he could help her. Jake stood nearby watching as the doctor cleaned and bandaged the alien girl's injuries. Her arm was indeed broken, and she had several deep cuts from the crash. But what worried Rodriguez more was how thin and weak she looked. It was clear she had been running and hiding for a long time. Captain Hayes entered the medical bay with Chief Petty Officer Ryan Cole behind her. Cole was the ship's security chief, and Jake could see he was not happy about their new passenger. His hand rested on his sidearm, and his eyes never left Zara. "How is she, Doctor?" Hayes asked. "She'll live," Rodriguez replied. "The injuries are serious but not life-threatening. However, she's severely malnourished. I'd say she hasn't had a proper meal in weeks." Zara's eyes opened at the sound of voices. She looked around fearfully until she saw Jake. Then her expression relaxed slightly. "You are safe," Jake told her. "These are my friends. They want to help you, too." Cole stepped forward with a skeptical expression. "We need to know what we're dealing with, Captain. For all we know, she could be some kind of spy or weapon." "I am not weapon," Zara said weakly. "I am just girl who want to live." Hayes pulled up a chair next to the medical table. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Zara, we need you to tell us everything. Who are your people and why are they hunting you?" Zara struggled to sit up, despite Rodriguez's protests. Jake helped her get comfortable before she began to speak. Her English was broken but improving as she talked. "My people are called Velthari. We come from star system far from here. Our society very old and very strict. We have rules for everything." "What kind of rules?" Hayes asked. "Rules about who live and who die. When Velthari become adult, they must face the choosing. Is test to see if worthy to continue living." Cole crossed his arms. "What kind of test kills children?" Zara's expression grew dark. "Many kinds. First they test body. Must run long distance without water. Must fight trained. Warriors with bare hands. Must survive in wild with no food or shelter for many days." Rodriguez looked horrified. "That's barbaric." "Is not all," Zara continued. "They also test mind. Put you in machine that show your worst fears. Make you solve puzzles while they hurt you. Some go crazy and never recover." Jake felt his anger growing. "How many survive these tests?" "Maybe 3 out of 10. Others die or go mad. Is the way. Population stays small. Only strong survive to breed." Hayes leaned forward. "But you escaped before taking the tests?" Zara shook her head. "No. I take first tests. Fail badly. Body too weak. Mind too soft, they say. Was scheduled for final test next day. Is combat to death with honor keeper. No one survive final test who already fail others." "So you ran," Jake said. "Stole small ship in night. Parents pretend not to see. They love me, but cannot help. To help failed child means death for whole family." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Cole looked less suspicious now and more disturbed. Hayes was calculating something in her head. Rodriguez continued working on Zara's injuries, but Jake could see his hands shaking slightly. "How long ago did you escape?" Hayes asked. "Many days? Maybe 2 weeks your time. Ship broke down. Landed on asteroid to fix, but systems too damaged. Send distress signal hoping someone here." "And your people have been tracking you?" Zara nodded sadly. "They must. Is law. One who run from choosing brings shame to all Velthari. Must be brought back and killed publicly to restore honor." Cole finally spoke up. "How many ships are hunting you?" "Fleet of 20 warships, led by war leader Kethvar. He my uncle, but will show no mercy. Honor more important than blood to Velthari." Hayes stood up and began pacing. Jake could see her mind working through the implications. A fleet of 20 alien warships coming after them. The Starforge was a mining vessel with minimal weapons and shields. They could not hope to fight such a force. "What are their ships like?" Hayes asked. "How do they compare to ours?" "Much faster, much stronger weapons. Your ship would not last long in battle." Rodriguez finished bandaging Zara's arm and stepped back. "Captain, we need to get her to a human colony, somewhere with proper defenses." "Nearest colony is 4 months away," Hayes replied. "We don't have that kind of time." Cole moved closer to the group. "Maybe we should consider surrendering her. I don't like it, but we have to think about the crew." Jake spun around to face him. "We're not handing over a kid to be murdered." "She's not human, Jake. These are her people and their customs. We don't have the right to interfere." "We have the right to protect someone who asked for our help," Jake shot back. Hayes held up her hand for silence. "Both of you calm down. We're not making any decisions until we know more." She turned back to Zara. "Tell us about your people's technology, their weapons and defenses. Ships powered by quantum cores. Weapons use focused energy beams. Shields very strong. But biggest advantage is speed. Can travel much faster than your ships." "Any weaknesses?" Hayes asked. Zara thought for a moment. "Pride. Velthari very proud. Sometimes do stupid things to maintain honor. Also, they follow old laws exactly. Cannot change rules even when rules make no sense." Jake leaned against the wall, thinking. There had to be some way out of this. Some option they were not seeing. An entire civilization that murdered its own children could not be allowed to continue unchallenged. "Zara," he said suddenly, "these old laws you mentioned, are there any that might help us?" "What you mean?" "Laws about outsiders, about other species interfering with your customs." Zara's eyes widened as she understood. "There is one law, very old. If outsider interfere with choosing, they can take place of runaway, but must face trials alone with no help and no advanced technology." Hayes stopped pacing. "What does that mean exactly?" "Outsider would be taken to trial world. Must face same tests as Velthari youth. If survive all trials, runaway goes free. If die outsider dies and runaway still executed. And if no one volunteers to take their place, then runaway brought back and killed immediately." Cole shook his head. "That's suicide. You just said only 3 out of 10 survive and they're trained for it from birth." "But it's a chance," Jake said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Hayes's expression was worried. "Jake, you can't be serious." "Why not? It's better than just handing her over to die." "You would do this for me?" Zara asked in wonder. "Risk your life for stranger?" Jake looked down at the young alien girl. She was frightened and alone and facing certain death. Her own people wanted to kill her for being different, for being weak. But Jake saw something else in her eyes. Intelligence and kindness and hope. "That's what humans do," he said simply. "We protect the innocent." Rodriguez stepped forward. "Jake, think about this carefully. Even if you somehow survived the trials, you'd be stranded on an alien world with no way home. The laws say if outsiders survive all trials, they granted honor. Status among Velthari, Zara said quietly, would be free to go or stay as choose." Hayes sat down heavily in her chair. "This is insane. We're talking about one man against an entire alien military." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But what's the alternative? Let them take her and pretend it never happened?" Cole looked conflicted. "Jake, I admire what you're trying to do, but this is bigger than one person. We have families back home, responsibilities." Jake understood Cole's concerns, but his mind was made up. He had seen too much suffering in his life. His father had died in a mining accident when Jake was young. His mother had worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. He knew what it was like to feel helpless and alone. "I'm not asking anyone else to risk their lives," Jake said. "This is my choice." Hayes stood up and moved to the viewport. Outside, stars twinkled in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, a fleet of alien warships was heading their way. In a few hours or days, they would arrive and demand Zara's return. "We need more information," Hayes said finally. "Zara, I want you to tell us everything you know about these trials, every detail, no matter how small." As Zara began describing the horrors of the choosing, Jake listened carefully. He was scared, but also determined. This young alien had risked everything to escape a brutal death. Now it was time for someone to stand up for her. The enemy fleet was coming, but Jake would be ready for them. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished checking the mining equipment for the 3rd time that day. The deep space mining vessel Starforge hummed quietly around him as it moved through the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system. He had been working on these ships for 6 years now, but the endless black of space still made him feel small sometimes. The mining operation was going well. They had found good deposits of rare metals in several asteroids, and the crew was happy. Captain Lisa Hayes ran a tight ship, but she was fair to everyone. Jake respected her and knew she trusted him with the difficult jobs. That trust meant everything to him out here in the middle of nowhere. Jake was adjusting a drill calibration when the ship's communication system crackled to life. Static filled the bridge, and then a weak signal came through. It was not like anything they had heard before. The sound was strange and broken, but it was clearly a distress call. Captain Hayes called all senior crew to the bridge immediately. Jake put down his tools and hurried to join them. When he arrived, he found Hayes standing over the communication console with a worried look on her face. The ship's communication officer was trying to clean up the signal. "What do we have?" Hayes asked as Jake entered. "It's coming from asteroid cluster 74 Alpha," the communication officer replied. "The signal is very weak, and we're getting interference, but it's definitely artificial. Someone is out there." Jake listened carefully as the static cleared a bit more. Underneath all the noise, he could hear what sounded like a voice. It was high, pitched, and desperate. The words were not in any language he recognized, but the tone was universal. Someone was in trouble. "How far is that cluster?" Hayes asked. "About 4 hours at current speed," replied the navigation officer. "But, Captain, that cluster is not on any of our charts. We've never surveyed that area." Hayes nodded slowly. Jake could see her thinking through the situation. They were a mining ship, not a rescue vessel. Their job was to extract valuable materials and return to Earth with full cargo holds. But the code of space was clear. If someone needed help, you helped them no matter what. "Change course," Hayes ordered. "Full speed to that cluster." The next few hours passed slowly for Jake. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting to that distress signal. Who could be out here? The nearest human colony was months away. Maybe it was another mining ship that had run into trouble. But something about that voice bothered him. It sounded different somehow. When they reached the asteroid cluster, Hayes called Jake to the bridge again. Through the main viewer, they could see dozens of large rocks floating in space. Most of them looked normal, but one caught Jake's attention immediately. It had what looked like metal sticking out of it. "There," Jake pointed. "That's not natural." Hayes nodded and ordered the ship to move closer. As they got nearer, they could see it clearly. A small spacecraft had crashed into the asteroid. The ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was smooth and curved with no sharp edges. The metal looked almost alive in the starlight. "I'm reading life signs," reported the science officer. "Very weak, but definitely there." "Can we dock with it?" Hayes asked. "Negative, Captain. The wreckage is too unstable. Someone would have to EVA over to it." Jake stepped forward before Hayes could ask for volunteers. "I'll go, Captain." Hayes looked at him carefully. EVA missions were always dangerous, but this one was especially risky. The wreckage could collapse at any moment, and they had no idea what they might find inside. "Are you sure, Jake?" Hayes asked. "We don't know what's in there." "Someone's alive, Captain. That's all that matters." Hayes nodded slowly. She knew Jake was the best person for the job. He was careful but brave and had more EVA experience than anyone else on the crew. Jake spent an hour preparing for the mission. He checked his suit systems twice and packed extra oxygen and medical supplies. He also brought cutting tools in case he needed to get through damaged sections of the alien ship. The EVA went smoothly at first. Jake pushed off from the Starforge and used his suit thrusters to guide himself to the wreckage. Up close, the alien ship looked even stranger. The metal seemed to shimmer and change color as he moved. He found what looked like an airlock and managed to get it open. Inside, the ship was dark and full of smoke. Jake switched on his helmet lights and began searching. The layout was confusing. Nothing looked like human ship design. Corridors curved in ways that made no sense, and rooms seemed to flow into each other. Jake followed his scanner toward the life signs. They led him deeper into the wreckage until he found a small chamber near what might have been the engine room. There in the corner was something that made him stop and stare. It was clearly alive and clearly not human. The being was small and looked young. It had pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Its limbs were thin, and it wore what looked like simple clothes. When Jake's lights hit it, the creature looked up at him with fear and hope mixed together. "Please," the being said in broken English. "Help me." Jake was so surprised he almost forgot to breathe. The creature could speak English. Not well, but well enough to communicate. He moved closer slowly, trying not to frighten it. "I'm here to help," Jake said gently. "Are you hurt?" The alien tried to stand but collapsed immediately. Jake could see it was badly injured. There was purple blood on its clothes and one arm looked broken. "My name is Zara," the creature said weakly. "I learn your words from your signals. Please, you must help me." "I will help you, Zara. My name is Jake. Can you move?" Zara shook her head. "Hurt bad, but you must know. My people come soon. They look for me. If they find me, they will take me back." "Take you back where?" "To the choosing. I run away, but they follow. If they catch me, I die." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This young alien had fled from her own people to escape death. Now she was asking him for help against enemies he knew nothing about. "Why do they want to kill you?" Jake asked as he began checking her injuries. "Is our way. Young ones must prove worth or die. I fail test. I run instead of face death." Jake carefully lifted Zara in his arms. She was lighter than he expected. As he carried her toward his entry point, he tried to process what she had told him. An alien culture that killed its own children if they failed some kind of test. The idea made him angry. "You're safe now," he told her. "We'll protect you." Zara looked up at him with those large, dark eyes. "Your people different. You help stranger. My people would leave you to die." Jake smiled grimly as he activated his suits. communication system to contact the Starforge. That's the difference between us and them, I guess. As Jake guided them both back toward the mining ship, he wondered what they were getting themselves into. Zara had escaped from her people, but now they were coming after her. How long before her hunters found the Starforge? And what would they do when they discovered humans had interfered with their brutal customs? The rescue was just the beginning, Jake realized. The real challenge was still coming.